Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday, June 20th, 2025. Time for another show. Time for extra sunlight, I guess. It is the summer solstice. So if you're a druid, have a great day. Everybody else put on sunblock, I guess. Unless, of course, you're a southern hemisphere druid, in which case, happy winter solstice, I suppose. And, or I guess it's summer solstice for you. It just means a different thing. I don't know. What do southern druids have to say? Are there any? And if you're in the southern hemisphere, I suppose there's some places where you might still need some sunblock. I don't know. Anyway, the South Pole isn't one of them. Lots of sunlight, longest day of the year, I guess. I never really understood exactly what the solstice was all about, and it kind of tends to move a little bit, but I guess, is that it's not the longest day per se. I guess it's the day on which the sun, or as far north as the sun reaches, I guess, even though the sun isn't the one doing the moving. Anyway, never mind. That doesn't matter. Apparently, I looked it up to see which date was it on, but it gave me a time. It's like 10:30 p.m. tonight. And I'm like, but the sun's down, in my house. The sun's down there. If you're in Reykjavik, probably not. A little further north, definitely not. I was just checking in on my favorite pals up there in Iceland, and how long is your day these days? And they got about 3 hours of sundown time between, like midnight and 3 a.m. or something like that. And, it's kind of wild. And if you go even just a little further north, I was just looking at the weather app, the Weather Channel app that's supposed to replace the National Weather Service, even though, the National Weather Service has to generate the data for the weather app. Anyway, checking their sun up, sundown times just for fun and looking at the Reykjavik numbers. And a little further north, the northern towns, they just have dashes, like for the time when it's supposed to sunrise and sunset. Not applicable. Sorry. The sun is up. And also interestingly, the first, stat that it offers on the daily, info pages, where here at home, it would offer you the sunrise, sunset times. And then you can, swipe left, I guess, and move over to the moonrise times. They begin with the moonrise times. I guess basically they're like, well, sunrise and sunset, probably less applicable to you. I don't know what you would need to know the moonrise, moonset times for anyway, but since it's the only thing moving in the sky, relative to us, they tell them the moon stuff. So there you go. I don't know. The fact of the day, imperfectly and only partially explained, in a way that will make you go out and explore, perhaps, the weather app. And this has been brought to you by the Weather Channel, which has paid us nothing in order to do this. All right. So let's see. It's Friday. That's great, because I'm exhausted, because I've been on a relaxing vacation. And as you know, that's very, very tiring. And also, I will point this out. When you're in a beautiful seaside location and the sky is full of birds, and it's cool to get up and see if you can spot some new ones, and you just want to hear the waves, up at 6 a.m., you got it. Absolutely. Can't wait to get up, make some coffee, sit out on the porch, and just wait for everybody else to wake up. Back at home, oh my God. And what's waiting for me? 2 hours of chatting with you about the news, which I like to do. And I still love to do it whether I'm exhausted or not, as you're hearing right now. Anyway, the other part of coming home that was tough, the production staff took off for another vacation of sorts, a vacation from our vacation, attending a friend's wedding. And though there was some backup production staff that does stuff like, hey, you missed this story, or I looked that up and here's the answer to your question that you asked out into the ether. still here. I'm doing my best not to identify anybody these days, so you get chased down by, government agents or people dressed up pretending to be government agents, even though they're dressed like, mobsters. Anyway, it was a day spent trying to learn the ropes of using the fancy pants editing suite that he's got. And I have these great explainer videos. He made these fantastic explainer videos, and they work. It just took me all day to do it. So many of you were wondering yesterday probably where is today's podcast? And the answer is it was on my computer waiting to get fixed. And I fixed it up and edited it up halfway and got the full-blown, high-res sort of, that's for images, but, the high-quality recording that we use for archiving, the podcast version, somewhat lower quality, so you can download it in a reasonable amount of time. But at that point, I realized, I actually did this one all wrong. So I went back and did it again, and then I made the other podcast version, and then I remembered at the end, so don't report me to Apple Podcasts. I guess I'm telling them this now. Those of you who were listening to the show live yesterday and didn't get a chance to download yesterday's podcast and are excitedly looking forward to it today, the treat for you is that Greg drops a big F-bomb in the middle of our discussion. Just he got, pissed about something about polling methodologies, in case you're wondering. And drops one, we're trying not to care about that anymore. But it does bother me every day as I'm getting ready to upload it, and the Apple Podcast radio buttons ask me, I can classify the show in one of two ways. Clean, which I guess it isn't if he drops an F-bomb in the middle, or explicit, which I wouldn't have a problem with that if he was just doing the effing F-bomb all the time. Or like when he talks about vaccines, right?
God, get the fucking vaccine already, you fucking fucks.
Okay, well, like if we did that for 20 minutes, you'd say, well, explicit, I guess, but even so, I don't know. I mean, first of all, just even that compared to, for instance, if you listen to club music at any point, like you'd be like, well, no, that's explicit. But just saying something is effing stupid, well, is that really explicit anymore? Does that actually count? Anyway, the point is, I forgot that I hadn't bleeped it. And then I sat there looking at it's clean. I went with clean. Because these days that passes for clean. And then I realized, in the new fancy editing suite, I don't even know how I bleep this thing anyway. I could probably figure it out, but it was midnight already and I wanted to post the thing. So, if you thought it was gone or I erased it or whatever, you can still find it. It's out there at the regular podcast stops. Go ahead and catch up. And that's what the rest of Friday is about. What the hell's going on in the news? I would ordinarily have spent most of yesterday catching up on that. Instead, I was editing, so I don't know. I still don't know. However, there are a number of things that I thought it would be of interest to discuss. And a lot of them focus on the continuing outrage of what looks like just random vigilante guys running around seizing anybody brown. And I've been seeing some of the people they're seizing. They're not even that brown, to be honest. But they're just harassing people all over the place and chasing them down and basically going on the very poor and usually improper policing rule of, well, if they run, then I definitely have to catch them because that means that they're guilty, as opposed to I'm just walking down the street and masked people are chasing me and I run from that. Or the very logical, I am a citizen and I'm being chased and I understand what's going on here and eventually I'll be able to straighten it out, but I don't want to wait 6 days in a detention facility with no one knowing where I am and no food or water and sleeping on the floor before they realize, oh, I'm actually their neighbor, and they let me go. So this is happening all over the place. I've just been watching videos from it from everywhere. I'm at the moment looking at one that Brandon Friedman had forwarded around. He got off of someone else, but it's a video of ICE chasing people down in Hollywood, California, where they don't make movies there anymore, and it's terrible, and I'm going to tariff all the movies that are made elsewhere. Bring it back home. Except, now people chase you down the street and tackle you if you try to make your movies in California again. But it occurred to me that a lot of these guys, they're sort of paramilitary in their garb. You've seen it, of course, and the masking and the sunglasses and the no ID and the unmarked cars, and there's all sorts of concern that goes along with that. But what I thought was interesting was watching this one particular guy chase people down, and I guess it's still part of the paramilitary, ex-military look to not only be masking your face, but to do so with the use of a keffiyeh, I guess. Is that how we're pronouncing it? It looks to me like keffiyeh, but I think it's keffiyeh. And pardon me if we get it wrong, but what I thought was interesting, I guess that came from, and there are many different kinds, and they have different designs, and they are regionally identifiable, but a lot of ex-military probably picked them up in Iraq, possibly, carrying them over to Afghanistan, back and forth, wherever they may have been deployed. What I find interesting about it, of course, is now that this administration is so anti-Palestinian, and of course the Palestinian protest movement very closely identified with the Palestinian keffiyeh, though there are others, and sometimes people don't know that there are. I'm vaguely aware that there are other designs, and I don't think I could pinpoint which one is which, though I've read a little bit about, okay, what makes this one like that, whatever. But in this country, it was always interesting when people objected to stuff like this, as our military veterans were wearing them all the time, but if anybody else wore them for whatever reason, it was simply labeled a terrorist headscarf or something like it. And you may recall that at one point they were doing their level best in what became MAGA America, but I guess Tea Party MAGA America, to cancel Rachel Ray because she did a commercial, a series of print ads for Dunkin' Donuts, or maybe just their coffee, I don't know. And she was wearing a keffiyeh-like, evocative of a keffiyeh designed scarf, but it was just a regular neck scarf. And, the Republicans are running around saying, she's wearing a terrorist neck scarf. She's pro-terrorist. We got to get rid of it and boycott the donut store. It was crazy. And now we're A-OK with people jumping out of unmarked cars with face masks and sunglasses and ragtag military, paramilitary equipment and keffiyehs, chasing people down on American streets, tackling them and disappearing them. And I'm just wondering what happened to the concern that anybody who was even vaguely wearing a scarf that looked like it might be with a Middle Eastern motif involved was obviously a terrorist sympathizer. And I mean, there's certainly a good bit of terrorism involved in all of this, but I suppose MAGA says, well, there are terrorists and they're tackling the right kind of brown people. Or maybe it's about time brown people were worried about terrorists instead of us having to worry about brown terrorism, except, brown people are the usual victims day to day of the terrorist situation anyway. So I don't think you'd be teaching them anything new about that. Anyway, I just thought it was really interesting that doesn't raise eyebrows among the MAGA types for some reason. And I think it's just because they're seeing brownish people being victimized, and that's all. And that's why they have no claim to legitimacy or logic at any point. All right. Also of some interest yesterday, I should look this up because I don't think I have an article on it, but I was surprised to see the news that that ICE had positioned themselves in the parking lot of the LA Dodgers stadium. Did the Dodgers just call their stadium Dodger Stadium? That's nice. That's good. They didn't sell naming rights to anybody at this point. So they're in Dodger Stadium parking lot, I guess figuring we'll grab any brown people we see there. And, there might be some on their way to the game, either to work or as fans or as players for that matter. But I guess the players are mostly shielded from that. Anyway, the Dodger organization as I understand it, decided, hey, actually this sucks, not only for business, but for, civilization in general. And the Dodgers, I guess, called the cops and said, there's weirdo people trespassing on our private property and menacing our fans, and we want them out of here. And I think the LAPD, in fact, showed up and said, yeah, get out of here, and blocked ICE from entry into Dodger Stadium, I guess, proper, and the outside property. So that was nice. And it reminded me a little bit of at the beginning of COVID, where we were, I guess this would be like, early in the pandemic, but late March, when we all were being told, hey, something serious is happening here, but we're looking around and saying, I don't see anybody with this alleged COVID, but they were all stuck on cruise ships at that point. But we weren't sure how to react to it, and we were being told, well, yeah, you should be doing social distancing, staying home, etc. And nobody was quite ready to admit that that was true and do it, but the NBA started canceling games and closing their arenas. And that's when people took it seriously. Like, I have tickets for tonight's game, but they're not playing it. What's going on here? Oh, well, it's the COVID thing. Oh, that's for real? That was serious? You were serious about that? All right. I guess that's now impacted me personally. And why would basketball lie to me? Right? So they go home and they sheltered in place and did what they were supposed to do. And I was amazed at that, because there was no such leadership from the White House. The President of the United States was saying, no, keep going. It's just fake. Keep the people on the boats so that we don't have the numbers. And by Easter, we're all going to be back in the church and it's going to be beautiful. It was insane. And of course, he did far worse as things went on. But at the point where there was supposed to be some explanation to the American people, yes, this is happening and we don't have it yet, but we'll have less of it if everybody just goes home. Nothing. But President Basketball had something to say and taught people this is real, and they reacted. And then I realized, actually, President Trump's face looks kind of like a deflated basketball, and I thought people would be confused. I'm praising President Trump's reaction to this. No, I don't mean President Wrinkled Basketball. I mean President NBA, telling people how, stepping forward and leading when the real president of the United States, allegedly, would not do it. And now President Baseball is stepping up, and you won't confuse Donald Trump's face with a baseball. Although everybody around him, all the women are beginning to look like baseballs. They're all getting fillers and facelifts and weird lip enhancements and stretching their faces out for some reason. The Mar-a-Lago face, as they're now calling it. But President Baseball is stepping in and saying, yeah, we won't be having any of this. Let's see. We could go to ESPN for the story, because and maybe that's more appropriate to do that if we're trying to, allow for or facilitate the idea of leadership through professional sports. Alden Gonzalez. Is it Alden or Aiden? I'm so old now. I can't even. It is Alden. Okay. I had to zoom in to figure that out. For ESPN, Dodgers say they asked federal agents to leave parking lot. And I think this is a very mild version of what happened. I think they actually got the LAPD involved. And I can't believe the LAPD helped somebody, but they did. The Dodgers, I'm sure, spend a lot of money and whatnot, so they get respect, I guess, from the LAPD. Federal agents with the United States Department of Homeland Security set up outside Dodger Stadium on Thursday morning, sparking outrage on social media and triggering more protests against immigration enforcement in the city. And as I understand it, there was also some controversy. I don't know whether the article discusses it or not. But I guess they thought it was ICE, and local reporters trying to track it down, and the LAPD and the Dodgers calling ICE and saying, get your guys out of here. And ICE was saying, it's not us, which is also scary, because everybody's been saying, well, how do we know when any of these people are legitimate federal agents, given that they don't identify themselves and they cover their faces and all that, and they look like punks generally. And but the DHS, I guess, ended up finally claiming them. But there's confusion as to which federal agency these guys are pretending to be from. And that's concerning all in its own right. The LA Dodgers, who said they denied the federal agents access to the stadium's parking lot, subsequently postponed plans to unveil initiatives to assist local immigrant communities. That's the downside of all of this, postponing this. But the fact that they've thought to launch such a thing in the face of this anti-immigration sentiment from officialdom is quite interesting. Because of the events earlier today, we continue to work with groups that were involved with our programs. Dodgers President Stan Kasten said, but we are going to have to delay today's announcement while we firm up some more details. We'll get back to you soon with the timing. And this, too, part of a larger trend that now I see emerging, and I should have grabbed this when I saw it on Blue Sky earlier, so I'll try and find another article about it. But I did see somebody somewhere talking about their local county giving protocols, developing protocols and disseminating them to county employees. This is how we want you to deal with encounters with immigration enforcement, whoever's doing it. If they show up and they want information, or they want to take a person, or they need something from us, or permission to enter somewhere, this is how we'll deal with it. Each county, each state, every locality, school districts, etc., now are working on developing these things so that people know what to do when these weirdos show up. And I guess you can now have to warn people. Masked gunmen, like, at the schools. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that Republicans, by the way, thought that every school office, every principal's office ought to have a couple of AR-15s around. In some cases, because they thought, well, what if a bear comes? That was an amazing one. Like, what if a bear comes? What, as a substitute teacher, as a student, wanders into the backyard? Well, if a bear comes and wanders into the backyard and the kids are out there, call the kids in. You know, as opposed to slaughter the animal in front of them with a machine gun. Yeah, I don't know. That was the worst excuse. But they really thought, oh, what if armed, masked gunmen come to our school to terrorize our kids and do a school shooting? You got to have AR-15s to defend yourself. And now, of course, armed, masked gunmen are coming to the schools to snatch up school children, and we're not shooting any of them. So I don't know what's going on, but that may be because we never gave the principals AR-15s. But I have the feeling that if we had done that, along with an instruction booklet, how to identify somebody you should shoot when they come to the door of your school, it probably would have had illustrations of these guys, and then they'd be getting shot, and then they'd be very upset and be claiming to be the victim, as they are now. They are putting out all sorts of statistics about how frequently their officers are assaulted when they are making their alleged arrests. And one, I don't think they're being assaulted all that often. Two, I don't think that the numbers that they're discussing in terms of increase, which is now up to, they're saying 500% increase, but there's a 500% increase in the number of agents they have out there. That I believe. So it might just be that they're getting assaulted at the same rate after all. But also, if masked guys jump out at you and grab you and you put your hands up and try to push away a little bit because just a instinctive reaction to protect yourself, then they say you're assaulting them and then they beat you up as well as arrest you. They were going to beat you up anyway, but now they say, you're resisting arrest or you've assaulted an officer. So I don't know how they get their statistics, but they seem to be mostly crap anyway. But yeah, I mean, if these guys come to your school, presumably you're supposed to, well, a couple of years ago you were supposed to shoot them, but now you're supposed to let them into the school and have them shop for children that they want to abduct and select a few that they like and throw them in a van. And by the way, release the Epstein files. That's kind of where we are at this stage. But the more pleasant reporting from ESPN telling us that a caravan of white unmarked vans and SUVs arrived at the Gate A entrance of Dodger Stadium off Vin Scully Avenue around 8 a.m., with agents saying they had detainees to process, according to local media reports and firsthand accounts. And what does that even mean? I guess they're not It's interesting that they even bother to follow legal protocol. We're not here saying we're come to arrest immigrants. They say we have detainees to process. Well, what are you bringing them here then? This is a parking lot. Don't you have an office building to process them there? Oh, well, we haven't got the detainees yet. We're here to detain some people to process. Like, whatever. I guess more cop talk and cop jargon. Step out of the vehicle, sir. You can see it's a car. You can just say, get out of your car. The security guard on hand, the security guard on security guard violence here, told the agents that they were not allowed on private property, prompting federal officials to circle outside Gate E. Roar! Let's circle out outside of Gate E, the downtown-facing entrance to the ballpark's parking lot where dozens of protesters gathered. Maybe we can beat some of them up and arrest them, I guess. The Los Angeles Police Department later arrived on the scene, and everyone was dispersed by around noon PT. Not physical training, Pacific time. But noon would be a great time for some PT, if you were wondering. Thursday's game against the San Diego Padres was played as scheduled, so that, at least that didn't get delayed. The Dodgers initially posted on their X account that they still use that the federal officials were with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They said they were with ICE, but the federal agency, and I guess here meaning ICE itself, actually said, no, that's not us. They denied their presence at Dodger Stadium through its X account. I don't know whether you're supposed to take X account postings as official because the president keeps doing things by social media and saying that they're official. Anyway, false, ICE posted. We were never there. The Department of Homeland Security said the agents were with the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, which attempted to access the stadium, and then said this has nothing to do with the Dodgers. DHS posted on X. CBP vehicles were in the parking lot very briefly, unrelated to any operation or enforcement. They just wanted some hot dogs and popcorn, I guess. Sure.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Trying to handle a couple of different things at once here, not successfully, but break's over. Time to get back to the Dodger Stadium story, just to get that out and done. And then maybe in the second half an hour, we'll cover a second story. A little meandering, but that's what Friday's all about for us. So let's see. ICE denied it was them. CBP denied they were trying to do anything, but it was their vehicles. They just wanted to do donuts in the parking lot, I guess. And ICE and CBP are both, of course, federal agencies under the Department of Homeland Security. Each division denying that it was them. Protests against ICE raids in Los Angeles began, of course, earlier this month after federal agents arrested dozens of workers in the city. Protesters blocked a major freeway and set cars on fire, but they were just cold. That's all. In the following days, prompting police to respond with tear gas, rubber bullets, and flashbang grenades in the wake of these protests, and a decision by President Donald Trump's administration to activate more than 4,000 National Guard members and 700 active duty Marines, although the numbers actually deployed were a little shaky, at least at first. Anyway, doing all of that over the objection of the city and state leaders, the Dodgers were criticized for not making any public statements in support of immigrants. Nobody knew what to do exactly. They're public-facing organizations like that, but, you know. I'm glad they finally came around because there's a lot of people who didn't, still haven't. The team solidified plans to work with immigration groups earlier this week and was planning to unveil them on Thursday until the presence of federal agents further inflamed the situation. Despite the protests, immigration enforcement activity has continued throughout Los Angeles, with city leaders and community groups reporting ICE presence at libraries, car washes, and home improvement stores. By the way, all of which were totally destroyed and burned to the ground by the extremely violent protesters, of course. No. In fact, as usual, life is going on as normal all over the city. Libraries are open, car washes are open, home improvement stores are open, and people are there and going to them because Los Angeles is operating as normal, even in the midst of invasion by federal troops and protests. They just don't occupy a great deal of Los Angeles's square mileage, and it's a city of millions going about its business as usual all the time. There have been riots in LA, and by the way, actual huge, gigantic, major upheaval, including burning of buildings and thousands of people in the streets and all sorts of chaos going on, and the rest of Los Angeles works just fine because it's an isolated area and Los Angeles is huge. But that's just generally the case. But it's not what it looks like on TV because nobody takes pictures of people going to work as usual in the same city where there's a riot. There's no Pulitzer Prizes for pictures of people commuting to work when there's a riot 6 miles away. But, you know, what can you do? That's what photographers do. It reminds me every time of the infamous picture that I mention each time this happens, of the one tipped over garbage can at the first Trump inaugural and the crowd of photographers around it. Have I showed you that? I must have showed it to you a dozen times by now. Anyway, despite the protests, immigration enforcement activities have continued all over Los Angeles because it's easy to do, because the life is normal there. School graduations, though, in the city have increased security over fear of ICE action, with some schools offering parents the option to watch via live streams. So once again, encouraging social distancing for people, thanks to professional sports taking the lead and the school systems taking the lead. But yeah, you got to now have extra security to protect the graduation from gun-wielding maniacs in, oddly enough, in cafes for some strange reason. I just find that so amazing how that comes and goes, as they feel necessary. Just like Trump, changing his story at whatever lie he needs to tell. You're wearing a scarf that looks like a keffiyeh. We're going to boycott your donuts, versus you're chasing people down and grabbing them off the streets and dragging them away in unmarked vans. Is that Beirut or is it Los Angeles? Well, I don't know. And it doesn't matter. Apparently. Not to me, anyway. But it doesn't matter to MAGA either, for some strange reason. I find that just very difficult to believe. Okay, so let's see a few other stories floating around that might be of interest to some of you. I got to get rid of some of these that I used yesterday. Clear the board, please, so that I can get to these other new and or old and interesting stories. One, let me bring you this one. It's always a good idea to check in on what Marcy Wheeler is doing over at Empty Wheel, even if we come late to the story and therefore don't understand all of the references she's making. She's got a very insidery style that appeals broadly to her audience and keeps you addicted and following along. It's an excellent marketing tool. I don't know if she thinks of it that way, but it is an excellent marketing tool. But this time, I think an update from Marcy's viewpoint on Gavin Newsom and what sort of place he occupies in the Democratic pantheon, I guess, at this stage of the game. People were not that long ago very upset with him over his choice of podcast guests, etc. And I'm sure there were some people who swore off Gavin Newsom forever as a result. And maybe it's wise, maybe it's not. I have no love for him in particular, but that's just something I feel that way about just about everybody. There are some people I admire a little more than others, but I try to stay away from the hero worship because it seems like a disappointing game in general. Anyway, Gavin Newsom runs hot and cold, and then very recently he gave a primetime address over this federal invasion, essentially, of Los Angeles, and apparently won a lot of new supporters over, performing very well in a very well-reviewed address. And Marcy also frequently makes a habit of pointing out to people who are chronic complainers, like me, I guess, but chronic complainers that, Democrats aren't doing this, that, or the other thing, or enough of this, that, or the other thing. If they start doing the thing you're complaining about them not doing, then you complain about it not being enough. You know who you are. Some of you are listening to the show, and some of you are right. Anyway, but Marcy is very frequently pointing out to people how those complaints can often be answered with, well, have you actually observed anything to see whether it's happening, or do you just want to complain because this one is doing X, Y, and Z? So she'll call people out who are doing nothing, of course, or being performative, but she does. This is sort of like one of her big sticking points with her broader audience, or the people who aren't in her audience, but who she observes out there saying the wrong thing on the internet. And she likes to point out, what's actually happening. And here, Gavin Newsom singled out for some praise, some supportive praise here, as being someone who is actually doing something, even though everybody thinks it's fashionable to run on saying he's either not or that he's doing the wrong thing. Gavin Newsom's troll wars, which I wasn't aware of, as a check against usurpation or wanton tyranny. That's, quote, usurpation or wanton tyranny. I don't know whose quote that is, but let's see. First of all, we're also brought up to date simultaneously with the result of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals review of a federal judge's order enjoining Trump from using the National Guard in the way in which he has dispatched them. Judge Charles Breyer originally enjoined the deployment, but that was, of course, immediately stayed pending appeal to the Ninth Circuit. And the Ninth Circuit went the other way and said, actually, it looks like it's A-okay with us. It wasn't a great panel, 2 Trump judges and a Biden judge, but it was a unanimous decision as among them. So, she discusses a little bit of the whys and wherefores of that in getting around to talking about what Gavin Newsom is doing. So, the Ninth Circuit, she begins with them, a panel of 2 Trump judges, Mark Bennett and Eric Miller, and 1 Biden one, Jennifer Sung, has unanimously overturned Judge Charles Breyer's order enjoining Trump from using the National Guard to protect federal personnel and property from anti-ICE protests, which may or may not in fact have been the point of all of it, but okay. The decision affirms the court's jurisdiction to review Trump's decision, so that's good. They didn't give that power up, and holds out the possibility that things may change, for example, in how Trump is using the military, or the urgency with which California needs its firefighting guardsmen. That could change the outcome. But for now, Trump continues his invasion of California with the blessing of the circuit court, says Marcy. The judges had all, including Sung, telegraphed at the hearing earlier this week that they would do so. Moreover, the decision itself is unsurprising. A number of legal commentators warned that Governor Newsom was likely to lose this case. Now, that's partly because of an 1827 case. Everyone knows what was going on in 1827, right? It probably happened in 1826, but whatever it was, it ended up in the Supreme Court in 1827. Martin versus Mott. And that case said that even if the president abuses such discretion as he might be, I think the word she wanted was discretion. It says decision, but it doesn't fit. But or abused such a decision or decision-making power, the discretion really. If the president abused his discretion in federalizing militia, or now the National Guard, the remedy is political, as opposed to an injunction against his doing so, right? You say, well, that's overstepping your bounds, and we'll all vote against that president next time, or something like that, or people who are members of his party. Here's how the Ninth invoked it for its holding that it must give Trump deference on this decision. And I hear Marcy tends to, cover so much so quickly that, typos are kind of part of the game, or changing direction in mid-sentence how you're going to express something. Or sometimes she's just got, a antiquated or a poetic way of expressing things. So what it actually reads here is, here's how, what did I say? I said, here's how the Ninth invoked Martin versus Mott for its holding that it must give Trump deference on this decision. She wrote it this way: here's how the Ninth invoked it for to hold that it must give Trump deference on this decision. I don't know whether she meant it for to, coming for to carry me home. This is okay. I mean, it could work. Oh, well, here's what they said in their decision. We are not writing on a blank slate. The history of Congress's statutory delegations of its calling forth power, and a line of cases beginning with Martin versus Mott, again, 1827 case, interpreting those delegations, strongly suggest that our review of the president's determinations in this context is especially deferential. And then jumping forward a bit, the court further explained that although the power delegated to the president under the Militia Act is susceptible of abuse, that's the quote, susceptible of abuse, the quote, remedy for this, unquote, is political, and again a quote, in addition to the high qualities which the executive must be presumed to possess, of public virtue, oh no, an honest devotion to the public interest. Oh my goodness. What are you guys even looking at what's going on here? Exactly. Right. I'm sorry, that's not actually what's going on. But anyway, these are the qualities that the president is presumed to possess. It is the frequency of elections and the watchfulness of the representatives of the nation that carry with them all the checks which can be useful to guard against usurpation or wanton tyranny. That's where it comes from. Okay. Well, that's not working very well, but that's the court's interpretation of what check and or balance exists as against the danger of usurpation. If he usurps too much authority and becomes a tyrant, well, you can vote against tyrants later on. So probably not a great assumption. Jack Goldsmith, though, has been pointing to the import of that passage all week, apparently. This won't be the end of things. In its assessment of the harm, the court noted that violations of the Posse Comitatus Act were not before it. The state is now, though, arguing in their motion for a preliminary injunction that might be the case, nor was an emergency like a wildfire for which California could claim it had immediate need of the guardsmen. Having affirmed its authority to rule, Newsom might fare better at such a time, and in any case, the state has added a slew of new facts below in its motion for the preliminary injunction. So basically the TRO restraining order that was, issued and then stayed by Judge, was it Breyer? And then what got reversed. But that just means the case goes back to his court now with instructions from the higher court. No, your temporary restraining order, the plaintiff will have a very difficult time, in fact, meeting the necessary tests, at least for, an immediate restraining order, but a more carefully adjudicated motion for a preliminary injunction, longer term blocking by the court, might be worth looking into. And now, if the state has some more arguments to make and some more evidence that they think something more serious is going on after all, or that they have a more demonstrated need to have those troops under state control rather than federal control, we'd be willing to hear it. So, it's not all over at this point. In the meantime, we would do well to take that lesson from Martin to heart. Politics remains a remedy, not just a remedy, a necessary part of winning on this issue and on defeating fascism more generally, while we still can, I guess. And increasingly, it's a winning issue. Polls show, even a Fox News poll that has Trump screaming, show that Trump is losing the battle to make this dragnet popular. Certainly Newsom has been focused on that. There's been so much else going on, Marcy says. I've seen no focused commentary on the media campaign that Newsom has been pursuing, even as he attempted to block the invasion in court, right? Oh, what good is he? He's just all talk. Sure, he filed a lawsuit, but he lost that lawsuit. And well, not yet. He's lost the early stages of it, but as they find more and stronger and sturdier legs to stand on, the fight in court continues. But mostly it's to show that they're offering some kind of resistance and looking for new ways to bolster that resistance in court, and in the meantime conduct this media campaign that she's focusing on. Newsom has been conducting the kind of media campaign that the most realistic assessments of last year's election loss say Democrats need to learn to do. Admittedly, Newsom already took steps in this direction when he started that podcast that everybody hated because he used it to interview Stephen Bannon and Charlie Kirk. Yes. But I don't know whether I don't know whether we're supposed to look past that or excuse that, or just he didn't know what the hell he was doing after all, or it was all he sort of stumbled into doing the media campaign. I don't know. I don't know if I have enough evidence for making a decision on all of that. Either of those is a possibility. Marcy continues, Newsom's primetime speech last week, widely applauded by those whining about so much else, has drawn a lot of attention. It is embedded here, and I'll give you a link to the article, of course, or I will give Scott the link to the article, and he'll give it to you. And then you can watch the address if you haven't. Newsom repeated much of that same content in a column published at Fox, taking his argument to Trump's base. And here's an excerpt from that argument. Over the past 2 weeks, federal agents conducted large-scale workplace raids around Southern California. They jumped out of unmarked vans, like we've been talking about, indiscriminately grabbing people off the street, chasing people in agricultural fields. A woman, 9 months pregnant, was arrested in L.A., and she had to be hospitalized after being released. A family with 3 children, including a 3-year-old, held for 2 days in an office basement without sufficient food or water. Several people taken in the raids were deported the same day they were arrested, raising serious due process concerns. U.S. citizens have been harassed and detained, and we know that ICE is increasingly detaining thousands of people with no other criminal charges or convictions. Those arrested with no other criminal charges or convictions rose from about 860 such people in January to 7,800 this month, a more than 800% increase versus the only alleged 500% increase in assaults against the people carrying these arrests out. Meanwhile, those arrested and detained with criminal charges or convictions rose at a much lower rate of 91%. That's a low rate compared to 800%. Trump is lying about focusing on the worst of the worst. While California is no stranger to immigration enforcement, oh, by the way, I have to make a note to myself of where to get that claim about the 500%. I think Philip Bump was talking about that. Or he was questioning them when they were saying it was 400%. So their response to that is, well, it's really 500. Anyway, I think I saw that on Blue Sky earlier. So as Newsom continued in his article, look, this is obviously a lie about focusing on the worst of the worst. They're just grabbing everybody. While California is no stranger to immigration enforcement, what we're seeing is a dangerous ploy for headlines by an administration that believes in cruelty and intimidation. Instead of focusing on undocumented immigrants with serious criminal records and border security in general, a strategy both parties have long supported, the Trump administration is pushing mass deportations, targeting hardworking immigrant families regardless of their roots or risk in order to meet quotas, which you may recall that used to be a big conservative boogeyman. Boo for quotas. We're against quotas. Oh, unless it's quotas for hurting the people who we think might otherwise have been benefiting from quotas. Then we're into it. Well, anyway, Newsom, I guess here, has started a Substack the other day, describing it as an effort to flood the zone and continue to cut through the right-wing disinformation machine. That is interesting. Despite our problems with Substack, whatever, this is what Substack was designed for. Big names, speaking out, the voiceless. Whatever. It is a good alternative what if the people who have platforms get booted from those platforms? You gotta have a place to go. Anyway, so do the rest of us, but you didn't have a platform before, and now you don't have one now either. So, no skin off your nose. Or mine. He has done interviews with, as best as I can tell, all male influencers of note in his emergency response room over and over again. But the response by which I've been most fascinated, Marcy says, is his trolling on what she calls X-itter, right? X-Twitter. That is to say, the thing that was formerly Twitter, but is now X-itter, but which she pronounces shitter, because it's not SH, so this is not an explicit thing. It's X, and that's just how X is sometimes pronounced in some languages. So, okay. She's been most fascinated by his trolling on Twitter. I still call it Twitter because it's a lot easier to say. The import of which I discussed with LOLGOP earlier this week. Everybody knows LOLGOP from social media as well, and they do collaborate quite often on podcasts and videos, and she did a whole thing that I saw the other day. Should the left take on Elon's Twitter? The episode they called The Cat Turd Deficit. In other words, a justification for continuing to participate in Twitter for very specific usage. And it's of some interest. You might be interested in hearing her arguments about it. Between his personal account and his press account, Newsom has been supplementing more serious messaging with both important political points and trolling. And I love making important political points and trolling. That's true. But I don't think I have the kind of account that could make, the news people and large audiences sit up and take notice on Twitter. I don't know if I can cut through the fog of Nazi wackadoodleism. So, for me, it just doesn't make any sense to generate content that Elon Musk and whoever owns shares of Twitter can make money from. So, I guess it makes sense for certain people to participate and not necessarily everybody. And certainly if you don't want to, then by all means, don't. The trolling, yes, accompanies important political points. The political points, focuses on the stature of California's economy, the role migrants play in it, and the likely risk of Trump stealing California's full-time guard firefighters. In the unlikely event that something will go catastrophically wrong, whether via economic collapse or natural disaster, thanks to Trump's jihad against migrants, and that's an interesting terminology to use always, and especially when the jihad against migrants is being carried out by people wearing keffiyehs, even if they're not authorized culturally to do so. They are wearing them, and you should point that out. Thanks to Trump's jihad against migrants, Newsom has made the case that Trump is responsible in advance, right? So if something does go wrong, or there is a disaster, a fire, economic collapse, chaos of some kind, that ordinarily you would call in the National Guard to take care of it, and those National Guardsmen are elsewhere or out of your control or exhausted from having been, dispatched to walk around circles around the blocks that federal buildings rest on, and unavailable to handle the chaos, even if they would never have been able to handle the chaos to begin with, you can now point and say, Donald Trump did this. So it's worth doing. Some of that includes building pressure against Republicans applauding Trump's invasion. For instance, here an embedded tweet from Governor Newsom's press office responding to one Kevin Kiley. Is Kiley a congressman from California? I really don't know. I can't keep track with these guys. If he's a Republican. Posting, Politico reports the Ninth Circuit is poised to reject Newsom's lawsuit. You heard about that. To remove the National Guard from L.A. Even a Biden judge was, quote, openly skeptical of his position. Newsom's decision to go after our Guard members rather than the That's their position, right? He's going after the Guard. No, it's actually protective of the Guard. They say, are you sure they should have this mission? Because the president is awfully stupid and so's the mission. So maybe we should, do something about that. Governor Newsom's press office responding to that, embedding it in their own tweet, saying, FYI, the Bonanza fire, another wildfire, burning just 10 miles south of Representative Kiley's district. That's your answer about who he is. The Cal Guard, that's their Twitter account. The Cal Guard fire crews are currently short-staffed because Trump pulled these heroes off wildfire duty and sent them to Los Angeles to be mall cops for a federal building. Yeah. I mean, look, and it's funny, of course, Kiley's like, Gavin Newsom is attacking our troops. No. Gavin Newsom is saying, use the troops the way they're supposed to be used, and heroically at that, fighting fires, tamping down on chaos surrounding real disasters, not fake ones that Donald Trump is trying to create, but still only successful at imagining in Los Angeles. Yeah, we need these guys back on the job, protecting Californians from natural disaster, which is what they're supposed to be doing. It's anti-guard to be deploying them to be, as he says, mall cops guarding a federal building. Newsom has long called out the higher crime rates under right-wingers. Marcy continues. He's called out Mike Johnson, Jason Smith, Tommy Tuberville, and Markwayne Mullen, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, by the way, for their state's higher murder rates than California. Oh, California's in chaos. They're murdering people left and right. That's why we got to have the National Guard there. Actually, the murder rate in your state, much worse per capita. The trolling mocks Trump's aides, including Kristi Noem, Pete Hegseth, Stephen Chung, and Caroline Leavitt, as when he contrasted how the Guard were left without a place to stay while Whiskey Pete was boasting about going to a ball game. Yeah, that incongruous message was highlighted correctly. And, oh my goodness, why is this sound so... Oh, you know what? I think I've my volume on my... All right. Well, anyway, it's probably the correct volume for you. And here is that embedded tweet, Gavin Newsom using his personal account to say, hey, Pete sent 4,700 troops here when they weren't needed without adequate food, fuel, or water, or a place to sleep. But don't worry, he's at a baseball game. And embedding DOD rapid responses post attesting to that he was in fact enjoying a ball game. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Sorry, a little bit late. Running back to the microphone, just trying to take care of a couple of items that really have no business being taken care of during a 1-minute break. But there we are. And we left off with Marcy retelling the trolling antics that Governor Newsom is successfully engaging in on Twitter, letting people know. Yeah, the big heroes of the National Guard who should be doing heroic things in saving Californians from wildfire, etc. Instead, not only mall copping it in downtown LA, but nowhere to sleep. And yes, troops can make do, and there are pictures of them doing exactly that. Doesn't look like they're terribly comfortable, but okay, they're troops, right? Yes, that's all well and good, but where's the Secretary of Defense? At the ball game, enjoying it from box seats, no less. He's not sleeping on the floor anywhere. But Newsom has focused his closest attention, it turns out, on Stephen Miller. That's always a good target. Newsom has been mocking Stephen Miller's total control over the administration. For instance, let's see, he has screen grabbed a CBS News headline that reads, Trump officials lift short-lived pause on ICE arrests at farms, hotels, and restaurants. And Gavin Newsom pointing out MAGA equals, standing for Miller actually governs America. And that was everybody's suspicion over the past couple of days while we were still off the air. This I noticed from even down in the islands, that Trump had tacoed his previous taco and was maybe considering tacoing the tacoing of the taco when he announced, all right, I understand. I've heard back from, I don't know, people imagine maybe it was the donor class complaining. That's always a possibility. And Trump announcing, well, we're doing things a little too aggressively in agriculture, perhaps, and in the hotel and hospitality industry, restaurant industry, etc. People don't like our ICE agents grabbing the workers, during their dining experience or taking food off the table for that dining experience by raiding the farms, etc. And yeah, on the one hand, yes, that's almost certainly the donor class that supports him, saying, hey, you're disrupting my business model. But it's also worth pointing out, Trump actually is in most of these businesses as well. Yes, don't forget about Trump Winery here in Virginia. It's not a huge agricultural operation, but it is an agricultural operation. And like most, like we learned even during the break shows, right, those in the agriculture industry know very well that their work, their business models depend on the use, in many cases, of undocumented labor, as with the Republican state legislator in Idaho who was honest about that and found herself targeted by other, I guess, ambitious Republican legislators there in Idaho, and having ICE called on her operation because she was honest about where most of her labor came from. But yeah, Trump is, I'm sure it's the donor class, but curiously, Trump has business interest in agriculture, in hospitality and hotels and restaurants, as we know all too well. So really, it was also Trump calling off the dogs on enforcement in his own sector. I guess eventually it would become perhaps too obvious, though, that he was favoring not only the donor class but his own operations. So anyway, they announced this pause or stepping back in terms of enforcing against these industries. And then while he was out playing golf somewhere, the big suspicion is that Stephen Miller took control of the auto pen and of the apparatus for making announcements and said, no, we're not going to pause or step back in our enforcement on those things after all. And then there was a moment there where it looked like, well, maybe Trump would step in and assert himself again there, tacoing Stephen Miller's tacoing of his original taco announcement that he was backing off. Anyway, so yeah, Gavin Newsom has made a target of Miller, and relentlessly at that, says Marcy, who took a shot of another Gavin Newsom tweet, this time using the Washington Post headline, Trump officials reverse guidance exempting farms, hotels from immigration raids. And Newsom tweeting, looks like Stephen Miller is the boss after all. Trump got big-footed by his own staff. Pathetic. That builds on a number of personal spats with Miller directly, as when Newsom raised Trump's pardon of January 6thers to debunk claims that anyone but him supports insurrectionists, right? Gavin, this time picking up on Stephen Miller's tweet that says, quote, didn't have a problem? Your state is a criminal sanctuary for millions of illegal alien invaders, cartel killers, foreign terrorists, like people wearing keffiyehs. Transnational gangs and insurrectionist mobs. Huge swaths of the city where I was born now resemble failed third world nations. A ruptured... Anyway, so that's what got captured in this screen grab. Gavin Newsom responding, hey, the only people defending insurrectionists are you and Donald Trump. Or are we pretending that you didn't pardon 1,500 of them? I mean, it's standard issue trolling, but of course he's doing so from, you know, the platform that he's got as governor of California. So that's extra helpful. And when he called out Miller, how Miller is undermining efforts to disrupt fentanyl trafficking as well. Stephen Miller complaining wildly on Twitter and probably trying to take on Newsom directly on Twitter. Thank you, Lindsey Graham, he says, for fully funding President Trump's request for immigration and border security. This legislation will provide our heroic ICE and BP agents, not British Petroleum, but Border Patrol agents, with the tools, capabilities, and resources they need to help keep America safe, sovereign, and free. And linking to the Budget Republicans Twitter account in some capacity. Gavin Newsom answering, you just pulled the National Guard that I placed at the border who were stopping fentanyl smuggling. Now they're twiddling their thumbs in L.A. The personal focus on Miller extends to Newsom's press office account, which has been calling out Miller's BS, although she doesn't censor herself there. Once again, Miller beginning by saying, Newsom's position is that if ICE officers don't want to get assaulted or worse by insurrectionist migrant mobs, they must withdraw from the state. Newsom's press office saying the governor's position is that Stephen Miller has no peer when it comes to creating BS, and they just go right at it with the word itself. Bullshit, straw man arguments. That's the press office. Correcting Miller on the legal posture of sanctuary cities is the next example. Miller crying, you run a sanctuary state that illegally harbors foreign terrorists and willfully perpetuates a criminal invasion of the United States. The government of California does not recognize, but willfully and maliciously abrogates the supremacy of federal and constitutional law. He loves the terminology, and of course he loves giving the maximalist read to anything that's going on. Is this person in the country without documentation? Yes. Are they a insurrectionist foreign enemy agent carrying a Mexican flag trying to invade the United States and overthrow its government? No, but that's what Stephen Miller likes to use in terms of the terminology to describe them. And Governor Newsom's press office answering, Voldemort trying to teach constitutional law is something. Federal courts have ruled our laws are consistent with the 10th Amendment. And once again, the White House is purposefully misleading the American people and making it up as they go. He's also pushing back on Miller's complaints about sanctuary cities, where he says, yes, California is a sanctuary state. That means that every criminal alien arrested by local police is, by order of the state, set free back into the community instead of being handed over to ICE. And saying here, giving a link to the Washington Post here. P.S. Voldemort, you should know the state has coordinated 10,588 plus times with ICE to remove dangerous criminals from the state since Governor Newsom took office. Newsom's press office has pushed other people's memes as well, grabbing up this thing here from somebody turning or photoshopping or AIing Miller's bald head, you know, not his
bald asshole.
No, that's the description of him personally. He's bald, but he acts like an asshole. Well, nobody knows whether what the hair situation is there. We don't need to know either. But photoshopping his bald head onto a cement gargoyle somewhere. I mean, humorous. And Gavin Newsom's press office thought so too and retweeted it. There, that's the whole thing. And pushing a TikTok video of Miller's early racism. And here is a TikTok video including video footage of Stephen Miller while in high school looking, poor. Well, he's got hair and a scraggly beard. But that's the infamous speech in which he's complaining that why should I be bothered putting trash in a trash bin? The janitors are yelling at me, don't throw your garbage on the floor. Well, that's what we pay them for, is to pick it up. So why don't they just shut up? Yeah, that's right. All he's ever done is whine about working people and immigrant labor, says Newsom's press office, introducing that video. And by the way, somewhere out there was news about TikTok. I guess we'll throw this into the bucket of 2-week Trump, or 2-week Donnie, as some people are calling him. But this is he's got another delay mechanism that I think Justin Wolfers pointed out. He's saying the president's not decisive. He's laser focused on trying to decide which delaying tactic to use on any given topic. Either a 90-day delay, as he's announced once again, he's kicking the TikTok ban down the road another 90 days. I think TikTok's been banned for a year, but not banned 90 days at a time. Or the 2-week thing, as he mentioned with Iran just the other day. What else have we got here? Trolling from the press office is getting more creative. I've already mentioned, Marcy says, the sustained play on Star Wars and pop culture references like to the Lord of the Rings, and 2 examples of them here. The press office has found many ways to call Miller Voldemort. I guess everybody loves that one too. And amid Trump's flip-flops on whether to exclude farm workers from the raids, the press office account has adopted the use of right-wing styled memes, as with that weird cartoonish guy that has a name and everything, not Pepe the Frog, but the weird line drawing guy that is alternatively drawn with screaming and rage or sobbing or then smiling when something goes right. I don't know. I can't describe it. You'll have to look at it yourself, but that use is the usurpation of right-wing meme trolling devices, which is fine. And Newsom also is the press office account, as Newsom also is the press account itself, is mocking Trump's capitulation to Miller on targeting farm workers. It seems like that's what this whole thing has been about. Did we really need another example? I don't know. Also tracking Miller's ability to override Donnie, including the MAGA means Miller actually governs America theme once again. As I discussed, Marcy says, with LOL GOP, this trolling is structured in a productive way. Not only does it play on Trump's own weakness, in recent days rebranding Trump's MAGA with that weakness, but it sets Miller up as the easy fall guy when the, stuff that hits fans starts actually hitting those fans, right? It does a lot of fact checking, but it frames this battle as much about ego and, we'll just read it. Ego and dick wagging. Can you say that? Yeah, I think so. The currency of the far right, in fact, as rational persuasion. Why not, right? Stephen Miller's gulag is not even backed by everyone in the Trump administration, and that's before the full effects of it. In higher housing costs, empty produce sections, and restaurant closures are even being felt. And Newsom has been making this about him, that is Miller, an easy target the same way Musk is. I think that's a good argument. There are two ways to get the guard restored in California: a legal win or making it a big enough political liability that Trump relents. Newsom is actually pursuing both. That is a good point. There are problems with Newsom's efforts. As mentioned, his outreach has been a veritable sausage fest, with a focus almost exclusively on outreach to male influencers, although that too could be driven by an attempt to usurp right-wing patterns. It's explainable that way, but of course, Marcy's not male, and therefore, I don't know whether she's being consciously shut out of this because she's female or she's being consciously shut out of it because he doesn't know who she is. That's always a possibility too. Or he's got a, serious idea, whether it's a good one or not, that he's going to emulate right-wing patterns and do the male influencers and try to reach the people who are listening to them. I don't know. At any rate, that's one of the problems. Sure, Trump won with the young male vote, and young men are the ones pushing the disinformation, but there has to be a role for outreach to women. I really wish Newsom had picked some other platform than Substack, which platforms Nazis. And obviously Newsom needs to replicate some of this on Blue Sky, which Newsom has ignored since he got a personal account. His official account is stayed. Newsom just got a Blue Sky press account, which replicates some of the trolling from Twitter, but thus far the trolling of Miller, which would be the most important to have go viral, has not shown up there. But everyone needs to approach these battles using all three tools that we have: legal, legislative, and political. You don't have to like Newsom to recognize that this trolling attempts the kinds of messaging that Democrats need to do more of. Indeed, his dickish personality and the long-standing bad blood with Trump may make this more effective. So it's a good point and something to keep in mind. And you don't have to become a Gavin Newsom fan to appreciate the fact that he's doing some of these things, even if you prefer to spend your time complaining that he's not. So there's a couple of overarching points to this. And also it includes, remember, that embedded video in which Marcy explains why she continues to use Twitter and for what reasons. And I don't know whether you'll find those justifications worthwhile, or maybe you need a justification. You're still enjoying doing some things on Twitter. I'm just not. But if you've got access to the kind of audience that they're trying to reach, that trolling approach might be of some value. I'm doing the same thing, but I'm doing it on Blue Sky, and it's not worth as much because the audience in Blue Sky is different. But I'm hoping that people who have got access to audiences on Twitter still might just carry that over. We certainly see enough Twitter content being brought over to Blue Sky. I'd like to see it go the other way too. All right, let's see. How about this also, again, related to immigration enforcement, and that's just still the big story of the times. And speaking of the story of the times, here's a story in the Times from just the other day. Is that really? Was this published just this morning? Okay. Well, it's a reiteration of a story that developed over the last couple of days in which, let's see, Congressman Jerry Nadler and Dan Goldman, both of New York, went to the ICE offices in Manhattan just on Wednesday and were denied entry to the detention facility there on the 10th floor of the building, but denied on what premise? We're not really sure, just straight up go away. And we're not going to let you in no matter what the law says. And this is happening everywhere. Members of Congress who authorize ICE as an agency and fund ICE as an agency and who have reserved to themselves statutorily, I think, the right to access and inspect ICE facilities everywhere are just being turned away based on nothing. Although, again, I mentioned to you that I had seen something from Brandon Friedman earlier, just one of many examples of the people chasing others down, like in Los Angeles. And it was the reason I was looking to Brandon's account on that one was that I had seen him. I gotta go find it again. That I had seen him making the point, an important point about the nature of this denial of access to members of Congress. But was it just the other day? Yeah, okay, here I found it. But here he's used earlier New York Times reporting on it. ICE imposes new rules on congressional visits. The policy specifies that ICE field offices are not subject to an existing federal law that allows members of Congress to make unannounced oversight visits to immigration facilities that, quote, detain or otherwise house aliens. So in authorizing the reorganization of the Border Patrol into ICE and CBP with slightly different missions, etc., they were asked to reorganize these bureaus, and in doing so, also, I think at that point, maybe they had done it earlier, or maybe it just replicated an earlier permission, but statutorily enshrined for themselves the right to make unannounced oversight visits. When they show up and try to enforce this law, they're told you can't come in. And Brandon really puts the right and fine enough point on it by saying, look, to be really clear, I mean, he had other things to say about this, but to be really clear here, the reason members of Congress can't just walk right in, like the law says that they can, why aren't they doing it? The reason they can't walk right in is because of the guns. Armed DHS personnel won't allow entry. In other words, DHS is using armed force to break laws. Democrats need to wrap their minds around that and accept that, as he says, the frog is boiled. That's a good point. Why can't Jerry Nadler and Dan Goldman enter? Well, because they're confronted by a guy who says they can't. Yeah, well, so what? The law says they can. Why don't they put the printout of the law in the guy's face? And the answer is because he still won't move out of the way. And he still won't move out of the way because he feels like he's backed up by armed agents who I don't think that they think, and I don't think that this guy thinks that they'll shoot Nadler and Goldman, but they will use force to detain them. We've seen that happen with elected officials, Democrats already. I assume they could try to resist the arrest, and then we can see where it goes. And I suppose if the officers are willing to say, well, I feared for my life, so I shot these two congressmen, then, you wave the paper and say, but they have this right. Yeah, well, they're dead now. Well, someone could be held to account for that. Yeah, they could. Eventually. I don't know. I mean, on the other hand, Trump could pardon them, so nobody knows what's going to happen. But the real point here is, yeah, they're using armed force to say, I don't care that the law says that you're allowed to make these unannounced visits. We're saying no. And if you don't like it, you can try to shoot your way past us or push your way past us. We'll try to push you to the ground first and arrest you. But I suppose if you pull a gun on us, we'll pull a gun on you. Yeah. And Brandon talks about that at some more length here, too. I guess, does he put an even finer point on it, or does that wrap it up? By law, members of Congress are entitled to enter ICE facilities unannounced. Preventing this is illegal. This essentially makes ICE an outlaw gang. And honestly, I know that seems hyperbolic, but consider what you're up against, right? We just read that you need to be doing right-wing style trolling, or somebody does. Gavin Newsom is capable of doing it. But listen to Stephen Miller describe undocumented immigrants. Invading army, insurrectionists, what garbage is that? Well, certainly by the same standards, the people who are blocking members of Congress from exercising their statutory authority by virtue of being armed and willing to stand in their way are an outlaw gang. And honestly, due to the political goals associated with ICE's threat of armed force, you could even use another word for what they're doing. The word we have for the use of violence and intimidation to achieve political or ideological goals. Has anybody thought about what that word might be? It might help you would it help you put the puzzle together? Might be a little bit unfair in doing so, but would it help you put the puzzle together if I told you that they were wearing keffiyehs while they were doing it? That's wrong and terrible and racist, but so are they, and more so than I am, I would say. Anyway, Brandon continues. I'll sum it up in one sentence, although I thought he did a great job so far. ICE is using armed force to say laws don't apply to them. We are there. That, of course, would be fascism rather than terrorism, but okay, fine. ICE was created to have a Department of Domestic Terrorism to which laws do not apply. Shame the Dems only had the presidency for 12 years since then, another 16 to 20 years, and they could have found a way to slow funding and expanding ICE, maybe abolishing them with just 80 or 96 years. Oh, well, okay, within just 86. Okay, I'm not sure. Oh, that's not Brandon. That was Drew Habits chiming in on Brandon saying, okay, I don't know. That was not well expressed. We'll say it that way. But Brandon, I think, did a fairly good job in pointing that stuff out. So where were we? Oh, yes, right. We were going to read the new information that the New York Times claims to have on what's going on here. What's inside a 10th floor ICE office? New York Democrats want to know. That's the headline. 8 members of Congress are accusing the federal authorities of blocking their right to examine conditions at what is supposed to be a temporary stop for detained immigrants. And apparently it's turning into a long-term storage facility. And they're confronted here in this photo by a Immigrations and Customs Enforcement official in Manhattan on Wednesday. The guy has been identified. But what was odd was they're there in their suits asking for entry. They're dressed as congressmen. He's dressed as I don't know what. He's like in casual clothing. As it turns out, he's wearing some sort of like novelty Guinness brand, beer branded button-down tropical shirt. And no one knows why he's dressed this way at work, and no one knows on what authority he claims that these congressmen can be prevented from the inspection the statute entitles them to. And the answer, Brandon gets right to it, force. Anyway, the writer of the piece that I've got here for today is Luis Ferre Sadurni. I'm sorry, there's a couple of accent marks there that clear things up. Ferre Sadurni. Luis has this for us. On the 10th floor of a federal building in Lower Manhattan, there is a holding area where immigration authorities have typically held a few dozen immigrants at a time for a few hours before transferring them to detention centers. But as the Trump administration expands its immigration crackdown, the space has become overcrowded and people sleep sprawled on the floor, like our troops, in fact. Sometimes for days, according to those who have spent time there. I'm sure that there will be right-wingers saying, if our troops can do it, you can do it. But I mean, you can easily reverse that and say, why are the troops treated like the people we're rounding up in these immigration raids? That's not great either. Descriptions of the conditions at the center, the New York City Field Office of Immigration and Customs Enforcement has prompted several congressional Democrats to demand that they be allowed inside for oversight purposes. Those demands have been denied. And there's really only one explanation for it, and Brandon got right to it. It's not in this article, though, I don't think. It's just implied here. On Friday, 8 New York City congressmen, Democrats in fact, plan to escalate their efforts to get into the 10th floor by sending a letter to Kristi Noem, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, which includes the immigration agency known as ICE. In the letter, they accuse the immigration authorities of violating federal laws that allow members of Congress to tour facilities where migrants are being held. From New Jersey to California, ICE premises have been turned into political battlegrounds over Trump's immigration agenda. More after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. One more segment to go, but we are engaged already in reading the New York Times piece from just earlier this morning. What's up on, not only what's up on the 10th floor of the ICE building in Manhattan, but what's up with the idea that ICE has some sort of authority to refuse the members of Congress access to the facility, though if a plain reading of the law appears to say they have that right. But as we've said in the past, rights that are enforced at the end of a gun are, if they're personally enforced this way, aren't necessarily rights so much as they are plunder, and ICE just plundering the alleged right to refuse everybody access to it. There's no such right exists, of course. And I guess it could be said, well, if Congress brought their own guns and they enforced their rights at the end of the gun, would they be legitimate in their pursuit of those rights? Would they still be rights, or would they just be plunder? And of course, the idea is that you're supposed to be able to write this stuff down, and then by virtue of the fact that we live in a society, point to it and say, this is what we're supposed to be doing, and everybody gets out of the way and the guns don't come out. But that's, I guess, what takes things to the next level. There's warlordism, and then there's rights. And when we live in a society and we can just point to the rule and say, there it is, in black and white, and people get out of your way because they don't want to run afoul of the law, that's living in a society. If it's spy versus spy or guns versus guns, then you live somewhere else. Anyway, even if you're doing the right thing. Anyway, as we were saying, from New Jersey to California, ICE premises have turned into political battlegrounds over Trump's immigration agenda, leading to the arrests of several Democratic officials, by the way. Where are the anti-tyranny Republican types, the libertarian Republican types, or the we live in a free America, I love MAGA types, for that matter? They are nowhere to be found. Congressional oversight is essential to bring transparency to the conduct of the Department of Homeland Security, the lawmakers say in the letter. And by the way, so Kristi Noem says when she's being confirmed or testifying before Congress, hey, transparency, we're all for it. We're definitely into it. We're the most transparent ever. Okay, then let us see your facility. No. Given the over-aggressiveness and excessive force used to handcuff and detain elected officials in public, DHS's refusal to allow members of Congress to observe the conditions for immigrants held behind closed doors begs the obvious question. Oh, everybody hates when they say beg the question. What are you hiding? Okay. The letter is signed by Representatives Dan Goldman, Jerry Nadler, Adriano Espaillat. I don't think I've run into having to pronounce the name before, but sorry about that. Nydia Velasquez, Richie Torres, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Grace Meng, and Gregory Meeks. The lawmakers also said that immigration authorities were playing word games by arguing that the 10th floor was not technically a detention facility, despite migrants being held there temporarily. The 41-floor office building at 26 Federal Plaza, which also houses one of the city's immigration courts, has become a flashpoint as federal agents arrest migrants showing up for routine immigration court hearings and appointments in recent weeks. And it was at one of those, in that setting, that Brad Lander, New York City controller and mayoral candidate, was arrested earlier this week. Brad Lander, there it is. Now, if I scroll further down past the ad, I can see that they would have done this job for me. Brad Lander, the New York City comptroller and Democratic candidate for mayor, was arrested there by federal agents on Tuesday as he escorted a migrant whom the agents were trying to arrest. Many of the migrants are taken to the 10th floor, where there are 4 holding cells, along with desks staffed by ICE officers responsible for processing the detainees' transfers to detention facilities outside the city, according to those who have been held there and their lawyers. Detainees are typically divided by gender in the cells, which have bathrooms and long benches built into the walls, but no beds, according to one former ICE official who worked at the center and spoke on condition of anonymity. The cells are not meant for overnight stays, and they have filled up as ICE makes more arrests, leading to reports of unsanitary conditions and people sleeping on floors. Mr. Espaillat, Espaillat, I guess if it's double L's, but Espaillat and Ms. Velasquez were both denied access when they showed up there on June 8th. An agency spokeswoman said then that the building was not a detention center, but that they would have been given a tour had they not arrived unannounced. But of course, the law says you can make unannounced visits. On Wednesday, ICE denied access to Mr. Goldman, who said he had told the agency twice that he planned to visit, and denied also access to Mr. Nadler, who I guess had not. They were met in the building's lobby by the agency's deputy field director in the city, William Joyce, who acknowledged in a brief exchange that some of the detainees had spent several days on the 10th floor sleeping on the floor or on benches. And this is the guy in the weirdo button-down Guinness shirt here. And that picture is here in the piece. You'll see it. The congressman argued that made the area a detention facility, giving them the right as members of Congress to inspect it at any time. Mr. Joyce, who said his superiors had told him to deny the lawmakers' entry, insisted that it was a processing facility and that those who stayed overnight were in transit to different locations. Federal law allows members of Congress to enter and conduct oversight at, quote, any facility operated by or for the Department of Homeland Security used to detain or otherwise house aliens. But ICE has said in official guidance that its field offices fall outside the law's requirements because ICE does not house aliens at field offices. Well, they stay there for several days, correct? Yes. And it's indoors? Yeah. Well, then you're housing them. No. We're transferring them. This is a processing facility where we're transferring people. Can you transfer them using a process that takes 20 years to life? You're not supposed to, but that's the claim. Well, we're a little behind in our processing. That doesn't make this a housing facility. No, it isn't one. And you can't use it for overnight stays. That's part of the reason we want to go in there to point that out. This is unsanitary and unsafe, and if you want to hold them, there's facilities where you can hold them, just not here. And those facilities, presumably where we would prefer you hold them, are ones designed for people to make longer than overnight stays. So just do that. Well, how about we don't do any of that at all, and we don't show this to you so that you can't prove that we're breaking the laws or regulations with regard to how we are housing people. And also, this makes it look like we don't care about laws and we're stronger than you. That's part of the show, too. The letter to Ms. Nome argues that Mr. Joyce's admission that the field office was effectively housing migrants, even temporarily, meant it should be open to congressional visits. When individuals are deprived of their liberty in a secure facility for multiple days, they are unquestionably being detained or housed under the plain language of the law, the letter says. In a statement, Tricia McLaughlin, the Department of Homeland Security liar, reiterated that 26 Federal Plaza was not a detention center. These congressional members do not have the authority to disrupt ongoing law enforcement activities and sensitive law enforcement materials, she said. Which is what? Toilet paper? I don't know. Mr. Goldman said in an interview that he was not trying to create a hullabaloo or create a chaotic situation by trying to visit the 10th floor. We were trying to give them every opportunity to allow us to do our jobs, and they still refused, he said. We're very concerned about the overcrowding, the sanitation issues, food and water, and hygiene, and basic treatment to these people who have been ripped away from their families and their communities when they're trying to do things the right way. Gwyneth Hesser, an immigration lawyer at Bronx Defenders, said one of her clients, a man from Colombia, had been held on the 10th floor here for 3 days after being arrested following an immigration court hearing this month. The man, like many who have been held at 26 Federal Plaza, was transferred to a detention center in Newark that has also attracted complaints about overcrowding and dismal meals served at irregular hours. The poor conditions, Ms. Hesser said, have been a particular concern for a problem for her client, who she said is diabetic and whose blood sugar levels have spiked. He said they don't see any sunlight, like they can leave their cell, but they never go outside. She says that the conditions at the center, known as Delaney Hall, a group of detainees held at Delaney Hall staged an uprising last week that led to the escape of 4 men, 3 of whom have since been captured. The Department of Homeland Security has insisted there was no unrest at the facility. And that was of interest to me, too. I saw earlier in the week, I didn't get a chance, of course, to do anything about it on the show, but commenting on it on social media. And it sounded like this Delaney Hall facility was basically like maybe some, hastily constructed thing done by the lowest bidder, or maybe a no-bid contract, for all I know. And that they were shutting people up inside these indoor spaces. But, I guess it's funny. I wondered whether it had anything to do with the fact that so many of the people that they are scooping up have experience in construction. And they're like, by the way, we haven't been put in a stone prison here. This is hastily constructed drywall over wood framing. And the fact that they've put us in here and locked the door doesn't mean there's no way out of it. You can actually just kick these walls and break through them. Or with enough of us in here, since they've locked us up and overcrowded us here with 50 people in this room, if we all just heave ho on this wall, we could probably knock this wall down and escape. And they did. And, what can I tell you? It's like Trump and paperwork here, right? I don't know. Build a detention facility. Okay. How? I don't know. Give one of our friends a contract to do it. Just build a damn thing here. And then, most people, if they're closed in a room and the door's locked, they're like, wow, I can't get out of here. But you can. And they did. Not that they, all 3 of the 4 escapees have since been recaptured, but one guy didn't. I don't know. That seemed like a really interesting story to me. The link, there's a link here to their coverage of that story, which was from when? June 12th. So it's been a little while. 4 men escaped from migrant detention facility in Newark. The detainees went missing after days of unrest over conditions at Delaney Hall. And I recommend taking a look at the article, mostly really for the description of conditions there that would lead people to realize, hey, we might have to sort of fight our way out of this place. And, that's worrisome all by itself that is even happening. All right. Let's see other things that have captured my attention over the past couple of days, especially via social media. Again, focusing on the demeanor and dress of the weird people who are supposed to be supposedly out there enforcing this immigration crackdown and not identifying themselves in any way, except in ways that make them look like they might be domestic terrorists. That's definitely a problem. And, where was, also, by the way, the comment of Brendan Nyhan commenting on Brandon Friedman's clarification of all this, the reason these denials of access to members of Congress work is that they are using armed force to break laws. And Brendan Nyhan, a political scientist himself, saying, am I missing something? This is not how laws work. He's actually also quoting from the New York Times article here saying the new policy specifies that ICE field officers are not subject to those requirements. You don't just get to declare that, but in particular, you're not supposed to both declare that and then try to enforce your interpretation of it with weapons. That's not how laws work. That's not how societies work. Let's see. Oh, yeah, there was the comment from Justin Wolfers that I mentioned earlier where, just to use his language, in talking about the TikTok knock-on, I guess. The president isn't indecisive. He said he's laser-focused on his only two options, decide in 2 weeks or in 90 days. And he's very decisive about which delay to pick. And he's picked the 90-day one on TikTok again lately. And we haven't discussed that, but, it doesn't affect my daily life because I'm just not a TikTok user. But it's here. Trump grants TikTok another 90-day extension in enforcement of the sale or ban law. There he is getting tough with the Chinese again, tacoing with the Chinese. I don't know if the Chinese have any interest in tacos, but, there's a lot of fusion cuisine going on these days. So you can find a lot of Asian-inspired contents in your taco shell, depending on where you go. Claire Duffy and Samantha Waldenberg reported this for CNN yesterday, on Thursday. TikTok just got another lifeline from the White House, amazingly enough, with President Donald Trump set to delay enforcement of the sale or ban law by another 90 days. And my memory of the closing days of the campaign was that it was falling to Biden to make that initial determination or whether or not to give them an extension. And the Trump campaign folks were screaming about how indecisive Biden was and when are they going to crack down and enforce this ban. And then, of course, they have failed to do so several times in a row. But LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. President Trump will sign an additional executive order this week to keep TikTok up and running, Caroline Leavitt, White House press secretary, said in a statement on Tuesday. As he has said many times, President Trump does not want TikTok to go dark, unless he was saying that he did, in which case, oh well. This extension will last 90 days, which the administration will spend working to ensure this deal is closed so that the American people can continue to use TikTok with the assurance that their data is safe and secure, which it won't be. On Thursday, Trump confirmed that he'd signed an executive order delaying enforcement of the law by 90 days in a Truth Social post. The deadline for TikTok parent company ByteDance to hand over control of TikTok's U.S. operations is now September 17th. But by the way, just noting for the record, Trump says in Truth Social, I signed an executive order. What does he love to do with his executive orders? Show them to a camera. Did he not show this one to a camera? I don't know. I guess not. LOL, YOLO, Trump and paperwork. Sorry. It just doesn't happen. It's been about 5 months since a law requiring TikTok to be banned in the United States unless it's sold off by its China-based parent company technically went into effect. But thanks to President Donald Trump's promises not to enforce the law, neither of those things have happened, aside from an approximately 14-hour blackout in January. Tuesday's announcement marks Trump's third extension of the ban. The The announcement means that the app will remain accessible for its 170 million American users, despite the legislation that passed last year with bipartisan support over concerns that TikTok's Chinese ownership poses a U.S. national security risk. So, 3 90-day extensions for more national security risks. Yay. And no one's angry. And it comes as both the United States and China seek leverage intense trade talks in which TikTok appears to have become a bargaining chip. The TikTok sailor ban law went into effect on January 19th after it was signed by former President Joe Biden last year. TikTok briefly took itself offline, sparking outcry from creators, but quickly came back after Trump signed an order delaying the ban's enforcement by 75 days. Oh, that's a different one. It was one of his first acts as president, made in the hopes of reaching a deal to keep the app, quote, alive, which it's not a living thing. In April, a deal that would have transferred majority control of TikTok, of its U.S. operations anyway, to an American ownership group was nearly finalized, but it fell apart after Trump announced additional tariffs on China, forcing the president to announce another 75-day delay to keep the app operational in the United States. There are key matters to be resolved. Any agreement will be subject to approval under Chinese law, TikTok parent company ByteDance said after Trump's tariff policy stalled progress on the deal in April. That pause was set to expire on June 19th before Trump's Thursday executive order, allegedly. Trump's latest enforcement delay raises questions about the status of a deal that could secure TikTok's long-term future in the United States. The Chinese government has offered little public indication that it would be willing to approve a sale, beyond suggesting that any deal could not include TikTok's algorithm, which has been called the app's secret sauce. That sounds pretty weird. At any rate, there's a little bit more about this, although, well, I guess we could probably finish it and still wrap up in time and talk about one more item before departing for the week. Where's that secret sauce thing? There we are. In a statement on Thursday, TikTok indicated it's still in talks with the office of Vice President J.D. Vance. Why? I don't know. Who Trump appointed to oversee the effort. He needed something to do on a deal that would secure the popular short-form video platform's future in the United States. We are grateful for President Trump's leadership and support in ensuring that TikTok continues to be available for the more than 170 million American users and 7.5 million U.S. businesses that rely on the platform as we continue to work with Vice President Vance's office, TikTok said in a statement. The new extension comes after the United States and China agreed on a framework. A framework, everybody. To ease export controls, a move that's expected to ease tensions and prevent further escalation of export and other restrictions between the two countries. It's not clear whether a TikTok deal is included in the framework, but cooperation between the two sides could make an agreement to transfer control of the app to a U.S. buyer more likely. Of course, no one knows what's in the framework, and the framework is a framework to agree on a new framework, so you never know. Just another one of his now growing roster of delaying tactics. We're working on an agreement. We have an agreement to agree to sit down and talk about something. This too, by the way, came up in the Iran context yesterday as I watched Caroline Levitt issue what was supposed to be, I guess, tough talk of some kind about the Iran war, in which he invokes the 2 weeks thing, which is why it was on everybody's mind yesterday. But I think the quote that she gives, I mean, what can she do? She's instructed to read this thing to the press conference, which is ridiculous. Why doesn't he come out and say it? I don't know. Why does she have to deliver? It's supposed to be like tough guys. So I have a message for you from the President of the United States himself. And if I had been the one to whom he had dictated this statement, I would have said, oh, hold on a second. This doesn't make any sense. Can we tighten this up and if we tighten it up, it can sound tougher, because as it stands, I think the statement was something along the lines of, there's in light of the fact that there's a substantial possibility that we may or may not enter negotiations with Iran. You know what? The substantial possibility that we may or may not, I mean, that's 100% possibility. It's very substantial, that possibility that you may or may not have negotiations with Iran, and that those negotiations may or may not lead to a way to avoid, actually attacking them. That's when he said, well, in light of this fact that there's a substantial chance that something may or may not happen, I will be letting you know whether we're going to, go military style, go in the next 2 weeks. So the 2-week thing was involved, and that was hilarious. And then, of course, the substantial possibility that something may or may not happen. I understand that you might say something like that off the cuff, but why not then have somebody read it back to you and say, what does that say? Oh yeah, that's no good. Why? Based on the fact that we're trying to reach a negotiated settlement with Iran, I'm going to wait 2 weeks to make a decision. That would be, at least, it might not be a good policy, but it's a coherent announcement. But you're not allowed to say no to him. No, put it out just like I said it. Okay. And then she goes out and she reads it so proudly. No, I get to read the tough words that don't mean anything. It's crazy. Anyway, we were in the middle of the CNN thing on TikTok. The new extension comes after the agreement of a framework, but we don't know what that means. It's basically a substantial chance that there may or may not be a framework in which to discuss possibly reaching an agreement with China. Got it? Earlier on Tuesday, Trump told reporters that a TikTok deal would probably, quote, probably require approval by the Chinese government, and said, I think we'll get it. I think President Xi, right, like shitter, but Xi, will ultimately approve it. Yes, the U.S. president added. The deal that had been in the making earlier this year would have involved several American venture capital funds, private equity firms, and tech giants investing in a company that would control TikTok's U.S. operations. TikTok's China-based owner, ByteDance, would have retained a 20% stake in the spin-off company, a key stipulation of the law. Several other high-profile bidders had also put their hands up to about acquiring the platform, including a group led by billionaire Frank McCourt and Shark Tank famous investor Kevin O'Leary, Amazon, AI firm Perplexity, and a separate group of investors that included YouTube and TikTok star Jimmy Donaldson. Okay. Oh, known online as Mr. Beast. I mean, I know nothing about him, but I know that name. And he's weird looking. He's a weird, unnatural grin on his face all the time, which I guess comes from being very rich from YouTube. It was Trump who first tried to ban TikTok during his previous administration. Everybody seems to forget that, but thank you for bringing it up, CNN. But he has said he changed his mind after he, quote, got to use it. I had personal experience with the thing and it worked out for me and it made money. I like it now. TikTok CEO Shao Chu attended Trump's inauguration, seated on stage alongside cabinet secretaries and other tech CEOs. So guess what? Like you said, Wolfers points out, he's very decisively kicking that can down the road. Okay. So, lots of fun things here. Yeah, 2 weeks for everything. I have to go and find that video, of Caroline Levitt, doing the, Trump statement in case you haven't seen it. You're not going to believe it, really, because it's so stupid unless you see it for yourself. So we'll look to see if we can't bring that one to you and let you review it over the weekend. All right. We're getting damn close to the end of the show here. Probably very little chance for us to squeeze anything else in, but I'll jump back into Pocket just to see in case there's anything I can at least point you to if you're looking for some more weekend reading. You know what? Here is a gift article that I got from somebody on the Wall Street Journal, which I think would make good weekend reading. How Trump blew up Northwestern University's business model. He's blowing up everybody's business model. We've all been focusing on what he's doing to Columbia and Harvard, but there are many universities under attack, and this is an interesting view of the logistics of how such a disruption would work and why. The federal government, it says in the subheader here, froze the university's research funding, and it hasn't offered the school a way to get it back. So it's very much like the immigration enforcement. They jump on you when you go to court to comply with the law as required, and then they put you in a holding cell, and they will not tell anybody how you would get yourself out of there. Very similar to what's going on in with the universities. And as it happens, I guess the gift link to this story has expired. You know, you get about 5 seconds to read the thing, and I didn't read it all the way through, but it was very interesting. So if you happen to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, or, as I recently was informed, we could use our local library's subscription to read the article, and I may finally give that a shot and review it over the weekend. And I recommend that you might want to check in with your local library to see whether they have available to you a Wall Street Journal subscription for your use. But it was very interesting historical description of how the business model of American universities had changed since, well, let's say in the post-war years. And that this is the way it was. The war actually had a lot to do with introducing this kind of steady flow of federal funding to universities for all sorts of projects, now mostly research projects. But it's a good backgrounder and a good reminder that there are a lot of universities that haven't had the spotlight that Harvard and Columbia have, that will likewise have to make do with a substantially decreased federal contribution to their budget, which probably means, as I saw another article pointing out this morning, as a record number of people get ready to attend universities around the country next year as first-year students, they will be finding reduced services and increased prices, and having to deal with that situation, all of Trump's making. And well, he loves the poorly educated, so he's going to do his best to make sure that even people who want to be well educated either have to pay more to do it or come away with less education along the way. All right, time for us now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as usual. And as usual, he's got his own collection of stories from around the country and around the world to inform you about, starting off with the New Jersey governor candidate and former lieutenant in the Navy, Mike Sherrill.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, as you might guess, Mikey Sherrill has critiqued Trump's military deployments to U.S. cities. I'm sure she hasn't got anything good to say about his deployments or potential deployments overseas either. But there's much more, of course, as usual, from around the country and around the world that you need to stay tuned to find out more about next, right here on Netroots Radio.